Well, good evening, everybody. Good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening. It is indeed an excellent day to serve an excellent God in and with the spirit of excellence. Good evening. It is so good to be here tonight. My testimony is that I'm still here. I am still here after a bout with the flu. Um, I can just say that I am here. But I am excited about being here tonight for our second Whole, Heard, and Healed Bible study. Whole, Heard, and Healed Bible study. Come on in this space. I'm excited to be here tonight to bring this to you. Coach Sherry, Chaplain Sherry, your community pastor Sherry from the 800 block of Mooney Avenue, the unmuted one. I am the one. I am the one who grew up in one of the most conservative Black Baptist traditions that taught that women ought to keep silent in the church, meaning that women ought not preach. I not only believed that, I taught that myself until I had my own come to Jesus experience when God called me to preach. And then I had to make a decision. Who was I going to listen to? Who was I going to listen to? Was I going to listen to humans, or was I going to listen to God? I made a decision, and I chose to listen to God. And so I have made it my purpose to empower women just like you, just like me, who was found themselves in that kind of space, to show up, to speak up, and to stand up. And so, welcome as you're coming into this space. This is indeed a free space when you get here. Excuse me. All I ask is that you like, share, tag, bring somebody else in from your circle, your clique, or your crew, because we all pastor somebody. We all pastor somebody. So I pray that I'm able to get through this without coughing all over you and barking as a dog, as my mom likes to say. So you may see me drinking water, trying to keep this at bay, but I'm going to try to get through it. So again, when you come in, go ahead on and greet me so that I can properly greet you as we continue in our series where we are looking at women who had to push past systems and practices that sought to keep them silent, to keep them shrinking and playing small. And so last week we talked about Esther. Esther, we focus on that when silence is no longer an option, when silence was no longer is no longer an option. And we determined that Esther had a decision to make. When she found out that she was not in the palace just because. And we also understood that Esther might have been in a position of power, but she possessed no power. She possessed no power until she made a strategic decision that she was going to save her people. So tonight we're going to take a look at a group of women, a group of five sisters, Zelophehad's daughters. And our text tonight is coming from Numbers 27, 1 through 11. I'm going to put that in the comment section so that we will be able to see this. Numbers 27, 1 through 11. And also chapter 36, 1 through 12 is going to be our there we go. That's going to be our point of departure, where is going to be our century for tonight. Numbers 27, 1 through 11, and chapter 36, 1 through 12. And so our what we're going to be talking about tonight is we will not disappear. We will not disappear when women challenge the rules. When women challenge the rules. And so when we look at our text, Numbers 27, 1 through 11, and Numbers 36, 1 through 12, we are going to be talking about a story of five daughters who came together to get what they believe belong to them. This story is not a loud story, and perhaps you may not have even heard about this story, especially if you didn't hear it at a women's conference or something like that. You're certainly not going to hear it on a Sunday morning. But this story, Zelophehad's daughters, or the daughters of Zelophehad, this is not a loud story, but it is a firm story. It is a steady story, and it changes the rules. This story will let us know what happened when we show up, stand up, and speak up. When we show up, stand up, and speak up. So again, welcome. If you are coming into this space, go ahead and like, share, tag, like, share, tag, like, share, and tag. Let's bring other people into this space. So the daughters of Zelophehad, they step into a space that was never planned for them. They step into a place that was never, they stepped into a room that was never built for them. They are not angry. They are not begging. They are clear. I'm going to say that again. They are not begging. They are not angry. They are clear. And what these five sisters, good evening, Alberta. So glad to see you tonight. Would you like, share, and tag and bring some other people into this space? These five daughters will show us what happens when women stop accepting systems that try to erase them. I'll say that again. That these 5 daughters, these sisters, show us what it's like when women stop accepting systems that try to erase them. I'm not going to read the text, but the text is Numbers 27, 1 through 11, and also 36, 1 through 12. And the first thing we want to talk about is you've got to show up. You've got to show up. Showing up where you are not invited. Showing up where you are not invited. So Numbers tells us about these daughters that they walked into public, legal, and faith spaces that they should not have been in. They walked into places, they showed up. Now remember, we talked about last week that Esther, even though she was the queen, she could not just show up in front of the king unless she was called or unless it was her time, right? And so now we see these daughters, they show up in a space that was not built for them to show up in. They showed up in the public, they showed up in the legal sphere, and they showed up in the faith spaces that was not designed for them to show up. And when they show up and they stand up before Moses, the priests, the leaders, and the people. So if you're just coming in, we're talking about we will not disappear when women challenge the rules. When women challenge the rules. So we're talking about 5 daughters, 5 sisters whose dad died. He had no sons. And the rule says that the property must pass down to the sons. Well, he had no sons. And so the daughter says, well, listen, why should we be penalized? Why should my dad's legacy be stopped because he had no sons? That's the gist of the story. The law says that only the property will pass down to a male. And so these daughters said, not so. So they go up. They go before Moses. They go before the priests. They go before the leaders and the people. Now, I want you to know that this matters. They didn't wait for a meeting. They didn't ask for permission. They didn't seek approval. They didn't ask a man to speak up for them. They showed up with their own voices. I think I need to say that again. They did not seek permission. They did not go and ask anybody, can they? They did not hold a meeting or ask someone else to ask a male to speak up for them. They use their own voices. And this is very important because many women are taught to be quiet, to keep their concerns private, to be polite, to be seen and not heard. But these women teach us that sometimes you have to say it out loud. That sometimes you have to speak up for yourself, especially when decisions need to be made. Sometimes you cannot wait for somebody else to speak up for you. These women, these 5 daughters, these 5 sisters, they they are in a predicament. Their dad is dead. They have no brothers. And they stood to lose their property because there was not a man. And they decided together that they were going to not challenge, not beg, not cause a commotion, not cause confusion. They were going to ask for what belonged to them. I want to put a pin right there. We do not have to beg for what rightfully belongs to us. We do not have to beg for what rightfully belongs to us. We don't have to ask anybody for permission. Nobody needs to speak for us. God has given us a voice for us to speak up for ourselves. So they go to Moses. They stand before the priests. They stand before the leaders. They stand before everybody and state their case. And they did so with authority. They named the problem without apology. And they had one question. They were very clear. They were direct. They were to the point. They had one question. Why should our father's name be lost? Because he had no son. They didn't beat around the bush. They didn't soften the question. They simply asked because they had a goal. Why should our father's name be lost? Because he had no son. They did not attack the leaders. They did not soften the issue. They did not explain their feelings. But what they did do was call a thing a thing. They named the problem. Now, this is important because systems often rely on women to stay vague. But when you speak clearly, the system has to answer. We can't hem and haw around it. We've got to know what it is that we want, be direct, not as a challenge, not asking for permission, but simply to say what it is that we want. They had one question. And that one question was, why should our father's name be lost? Because he had no son. They were going up against an institution. They were going up against tradition. They were going up against a law. And so what happens is, because they were clear about what it is that they wanted, Moses takes their case. Moses takes their case to God. And God says, they're right. Let's back that up. The sisters go in knowing what they wanted. They went in with authority. They went in knowing what they wanted. They weren't loud. They weren't angry. They weren't challenging. They weren't apologizing. They weren't tiptoeing around it. They were direct and asked one question. Why should our father's name be lost? Because he had no sons. And because they were clear, Moses had no other choice. He takes their case to God, and God says they are right. God does not defend tradition just because it has always been like that. Does not mean it has to stay like that. God did not defend culture. God did not defend tradition. God did not defend the law. God does not say this is how it's always been. So I'm sorry, you can't have it. God doesn't tell them to wait until the time is right. How many times are women dismissed, especially in our theological spaces, in our faith spaces, in our faith communities? The time is not right. Just wait. And how many times and how many years has that same thing been told? Just wait. And before you know it, another generation has come. And the same thing, and the same thing, and the same thing. God does not defend tradition. God does not defend the law. Because it was the law. God changes the law. God changes the law. And so what this does is tells us something, that God listens when women speak about unfair rules. Because indeed, the rule was unfair against women. And so I want to put this right here, that a lot of times when we say things are Bible, because it is written in the pages, does not mean that it's God. And I know that that's going to rub some people the wrong way. This was written, but it was discriminatory against women. And God changes the law. The women go to Moses. They follow the chain of command. The women go to Moses. Moses goes to God, and God changes the law. It's in the text. It's in the text. I'm going to read it to you. Numbers 27. So I'm going to start at verse 4, when the women go to Moses and they ask the question, why should our father's name be taken away from his clan because he didn't have a son? Give us property among our father's brothers. Verse 5. So you'll know what I'm talking about. Moses brought their case before the Lord. The Lord said to Moses, the daughters are right in what they are saying. By all means, give them property as an inheritance among their father's brothers. Hand over their father's inheritance to them. And then this is where God changes the law. God tell Moses, verse 8, speak to the Israelites and say, if a man dies and doesn't have a son, you must hand his inheritance over to his daughters. God changes the law. The daughters go to Moses and says, we should not lose out on our father's property because he had no sons. Moses does not dismiss them. He takes their case to God. God says, change the law. that what they have said is right. The decision, now mind you, and this is where womanism comes in, because when the woman is whole, she tends to look out for not only herself, but her entire family, the community. Everybody is changed, right? And so the decision does not stop with these 5 sisters. A new rule is set for the whole community because they went up against the system. Every woman who comes after them benefits because they spoke up. Other women would not have to fight the same battle. So when we speak up and when we see an injustice, it is not just for us. Everybody is going to benefit because these women spoke up. No other woman was going to be in jeopardy of losing out because their father had no sons. This is what happens when women refuse to disappear. You have a voice. Use your voice. These sisters, the courage that they had opened doors for others that they never may meet. That they never may meet. Some of us were raised to believe faith means endurance. Just take it. Just stay quiet. Just stay loyal. Don't ask any hard questions. Just keep the peace. Keep the unity. Don't say anything. But this story out of Numbers, these 5 girls, these 5 sisters, said something else. Faith can also look like standing up and saying, this isn't right. This isn't right. The daughters, they didn't leave the community. They didn't burn it. They didn't burn it down. But they made it better because they told the truth. How many times do we see injustices as women and we don't say anything because of this what I call the silencing syndrome, the institutional, the cultural, social, the theological silencing, psychological silencing that keeps us quiet. But these women remind us that tradition is not always the same as the truth. Just because it's been done does not mean it's right. I'll say it again. Just because it's been done like that and it's always been like that does not mean that it's right. But oftentimes what happens is a thing has been going on for so long and we think that it's theological, but it's really cultural. And we've made cultural things be theological issues. And it's hard to tell somebody that's not of God, especially when it's been going on for a long time. We've taken tradition and made it be truth. While tradition may have been truth at a time when it was needed, but there are some traditions that have outgrown its usefulness, right? It's no longer needed. So these women remind us that silence is not the same as peace, and tradition is not always the same as truth. These 5 sisters, they stood up, they showed up, they spoke up, and the law changed. And the law changed. I want us to pay attention to that. This is not about being loud. This isn't about even challenging, but it's about being present. It's about being counted. If you are tired of carrying faith that costs you your voice, you need to know that you do not have to disappear to belong. You don't have to disappear and become invisible just to belong, just for a seat at the table. Zelophehad's daughters, their story is not about any miracles or battles. There are no Red Sea splits. There are no Jericho walls falling down, but something powerful happens. The rules change. These women lived in a system that never planned for them, because women were property themselves and they did not own property. They were property themselves. Land passed from the fathers to the sons. Their father died without sons, and that meant that his name would disappear, because the more property that you had symbolized the more power that you had. The law simply left the women out. But they showed up anyway. They showed up anyway. They did not accept being erased. They walked into a public space and they stood before Moses, the priests, the leaders, and all the congregation. And I want to let you know that that alone was a bold move. That was a bold move. They did not whisper. They did not ask a man to speak for them. They spoke up for themselves. They spoke up for themselves. And this story reminds me of how many Black women of faith who serve in churches, schools, workplaces, homes, and systems that depend on them but do not protect them. We are often told this is just how things are. It's just the way it is. Stay loyal. Stay quiet. Don't push too hard. These women, they did not walk away and they did not back down. God listened to them and the rules were changed. The change did not stop with these 5 sisters. A new rule was set so that other women who would come would not face this same situation. That is what happens when women stop shrinking. Their courage makes room for others to live better. And so I'm only teaching this story because too many women think that faith means accepting what hurts them. Too many women believe that silence is holy, and they have learned to disappear in order to belong. These daughters remind us that faith can look like standing up and saying, "This is not right." Call it out. Call it out. You are allowed to speak. You are allowed to ask questions. You are allowed to be counted. If this story has stirred something in you, I want you to pay attention to that feeling. It may be a part of you that is tired of being erased. You don't have to become invisible, to shrink, or to play it small, just to belong. God has given you a voice. Show up, stand up, and speak up, and watch God move. Listen, that's all I got. That's all I got. May all be well with your day. Bye-bye.